Friends with Gardeners, and we're going to see if we can do something with it. After that, I'm going to edit a story, and I'm going to read a story. So we'll get going with that. Mr. Frank, thanks for dropping in. I feel like I just saw you yesterday, the day before. All right. Friends with Gardeners by Jay Wilburn. The year, Connor Tabler, age 11, started his own garden. Preposterous, he says. Absolutely. It was fun seeing you again. You're Connor Tabler, age 11, started his own garden. No, let's do this different. Connor Tabler, age 11, started his own garden the same year. Sarah Elizabeth Rankin, age 72, lost her husband of 51 years. Tom Duffy, making up nicknames. All right. Connor Tabler, age 11, started his own garden the same year. Sarah Elizabeth, I don't even know what I'm spelling there. Apparently I'm making up new names. Rankin, age 72, lost her husband of 51 years. Neither of them knew what to do with themselves. She was out on her front stoop in the shade. Their condo did not have, oh, it'd be her condo. Her condo did not have a real front porch like the house they had sold. In order to be able to afford to travel and enjoy their retirement. Now, she was all alone with this stoop and the deathly quiet house. I'll say living space. Attached to it. Tabler boy, that'd be capitalized because that's his last name. The Tabler boy approached with his basket covered in a checker cloth. He was a nice kid, not too loud, and loved Mr. Rankin's silly jokes. Approaching with that basket reminded her of all manner of fairy tales. Also reminded her how alone she was. Sarah guessed the boy's mother had sent him with some baked something to show how sorry they all were. Everyone was sorry. Okay. How was Scares? Scares was great. Scares That Cares a good convention. Third best-selling convention I've been to of all time, and all three of my best-selling conventions were this year. So this event turned out pretty well for me. I was also selling some crocheted stuff from my wife, so that helped me reach those numbers a little bit. Without those numbers, without what she sold, it was the second best selling. Without the crocheted stuff, it would have been just under Ghoulish, where I wasn't selling that kind of stuff. So sales wise, it turned out really great. The only event thing I had involved there was judging the gross out contest, but even that got me some attention, and people came to the table and bought some stuff. Kind of really cool to be there. I enjoyed seeing the old friends, especially the crew of Armand, who drove me, of course, and Frank and Tim and JC. So it was cool seeing all them. Jay was the best judge. And I got to see a bunch of folks there that I care a great deal about. I always enjoy the Sunday after the event when kind of the hardcore authors are just still there hanging out, and we can kind of sit quietly and just enjoy each other's company. So that's always the highlight for me. Traveling with Armand was fun. Just he and I. We don't get to do that very often, and there's just something cool about kind of being one-on-one and being able to talk through things. It was also kind of cool having his perspective there, kind of helped me figure out what was working for me and what wasn't with selling, trying to get a handle on that. I don't know that we came to any conclusions, but it was just fun having him around. That was a treat after the con. Wish I could have stayed longer. Yeah. Frank tried to play the When Will Traffic Be the Shortest game, so he kept checking his phone, and then finally ran out into the rain when he got it down to a certain number of hours and minutes. I don't know how that turned out for him, but he tried to minimize his trip home and spend some time with us. So it was cool having you there for a little while. I hope the drive home wasn't too miserable when you stay at the convention. I can't drive home on Sundays anymore. That's just it's too much for me. Same thing with driving up the day of a convention and doing the conventions a lot. I'm looking next year at maybe doing one in Charlotte, which is only a couple hours away, so I might do that. My drive home was 2 hours less than Tim's. Well, that's good. I thought you were about to say it was less than 2 hours. That was a joke that we were having, that suddenly you'd bend time and space by waiting long enough. So I might be doing one in Charlotte that I've heard good things about that would be close. It'd still be a hotel room and all that, so I don't know that it's any cheaper other than slightly less gasoline, but considering that. And then the only other one I'm signed up for right now is AuthorCon next year. Of course, we're talking about MondoCon again and all that for when that happens later next year. But at this point, the only thing I'm signed up for is AuthorCon. So we'll kind of have to see how things go as to what I actually do. But I had a good time. It's interesting. It's interesting the position that I hold in the horror industry right now, and I don't quite understand it. Some of it may be the Lit Reactor articles that I write, so it's given me some kind of gravitas or authority, so even some established authors kind of talk to me more as a sort of authority on certain things. Also, I've taken the time to write some articles about some of the newer authors and to give them some shout outs, writing about some of the people in the industry that have accomplished some things. So it there's some people who appreciate that, and I think it's kind of endeared them to me a little bit. But there's a lot of the newer authors, especially ones that have started publishing during the pandemic, who seem to gravitate toward me and like looking for advice and stuff. And the funny thing is, I always feel like some of those guys are selling better than I am, and I should be talking to them. But that may be part of it too. The fact that when I am around some of those younger authors that are figuring out various platforms and are, establishing their own styles and are really accomplishing something, I'm listening as much as I'm answering questions. So maybe they feel respected in some way, so they feel more validated, and so when they engage me, they feel like they have something to offer as well. So I'm not sure. But I have a number of the folks that kind of reach out to me and that kind of thing, and it may like just being placed as a judge on something and being introduced and what you've accomplished and that kind of thing might add to some of that stuff. So some of the inadvertently some of the things I'm involved in may have given me more credit than I deserve or something. And maybe I'm just aging, so I look, I'm aging faster than the average person, so I look older than I even am. But it's been interesting to kind of see myself taking on a different role in the industry than I have before. Now I would love it if that had come with more money than what I'm seeing at the moment. So that would be cool if that were a part of the formula as well. I'll move my camera there a little bit. I feel like I keep leaning out of screen. Let me see what it looks like here. Yeah, that's fine. So it's interesting. I've also, talking with Armand and kind of figuring out what's next. There's so much that about the industry that's been interesting. I feel like there's so many things that used to work that don't work anymore, and maybe they barely worked in the beginning anyway. And so trying to figure some of that stuff out as we work through and trying to understand if it's worth it to have a publisher, because there's even when you take on a good one, they'll do the cover for you, they'll do the editing. Sometimes some of them do it well and some of them don't. And then you're kind of left with, all right, what are they bringing to the table that I can't do for myself? And for some of them, the answer is nothing. And then, for instance, I have a book now that I'm just now finishing editing up, and my plan was to approach the publisher who expressed interest with it. They'd even offered a contract at one point, but then didn't actually get around to emailing it. So I was like, well, I have to finish writing the book anyway. I was a little behind from heart attack at the beginning of the year and all that. And I was thinking, well, once it's finished, I'll just touch base with them again, see if they're still interested, and then take the contract. But then you're hearing about books that aren't getting published by them from more than one person, where they've kind of taken on more than they can handle, even though they're really a prestige publisher. And then this publisher's like bought tables at conventions and not shown up, and just a number of things where it's not that necessarily that they're now a bad publisher or anything like that, but you hear these things and it's like, do I want to invest a year of my life into this and maybe end up still back where I started anyway? So is it just better for me to go ahead and publish it myself, even though the plan wasn't to do that, see what I can do with it and make what I can from it. One of the problems I have too is that a lot of the books that I put with publishers don't do as well as the books I self-publish, and it's not even about the money split. It's not, I get half of what I would get if I sold these exact same books. I mean, I'm physically selling more copies of books that I self-publish in addition to keeping all the royalties. And at that point you have to pay for your own cover, pay for your own formatting, cover your own editing and all that. But even there's some things I can figure out about that as well. So I'd like to engage with more publishers because it would probably open up more opportunities. But the more and more I look at it, the less appealing it is. And so there's only a very few folks that I trust to even put together a book properly and do better than I could do by myself. And the data seems to show that even though I struggle with sales a little more than I did in the last couple years, I'm still selling better self-published than I was with publishers. So I don't know what the answer is to some of that stuff. We were also talking that there's some, if you're an author that's getting on in age, so you're becoming older, there's a responsibility to keep up with what's changing, and it doesn't mean you have to engage anything. So, for instance, you don't necessarily have to be on TikTok, but I think it benefits authors to at least understand how it works before they say it's not for them. So, creating a TikTok account, even if you have no intention of making any, and then seeing what other authors are doing with it. What are the book reviewers doing and that kind of thing. And even if you choose not to do anything with it, just the act of being aware of what it is, how it works, what other people are doing can inform other platforms you're on. And I wouldn't necessarily... I'd love to see how Brian Keene will do on Godless. It's interesting. I sent an email to Drew and told him that Brian had expressed some interest, and I sent the email, the contact information to Brian, and told him to, after I told Drew to be on the lookout for it, just told Brian whenever he felt like it to go ahead and contact Drew and just let him explain what he can do and that kind of thing. I think that would be very exciting for both of them. But it was funny that he was the one guy at the table that was utterly unaware, and no insult to Brian. He has his market that he works, but and some of it may be getting rid of the horror show, but he used to have sort of his finger on the pulse of the industry, and now there's a lot of new things that he's not aware of. The whole reason I'm on Twitch is because he was aware of it and said even though he wasn't engaging the platform, if he were 10 years younger, he would come on here and do something on here. It's probably similar to some of the stuff he's doing on YouTube now, actually. Some of the stuff he's doing on his Patreon. But, I came on here because of him being aware of this platform. And I think there's a responsibility, even if you're an older author, you either become the guy that complains the world left you behind, or you continue to be aware of things. So even if you don't plan to do TikTok, just seeing what other authors create on there can help you do something else. And it's probably not a good idea to do everything, if not to be on every platform, putting all your energy into every single one. You got to make some choices, but being aware of what they are and how they work and what people are doing with them benefits you in the long run. I went on to Kindle Vella when it first came around and experimented with it and really didn't get anywhere with it. And when my time constraints came up, that was kind of the thing I let go. But just the act of getting involved with it, even though it didn't work, was beneficial to me in the sense of being aware of what's out there and knowing that I gave that one a shot, and now I can use that energy and what I created into something else. Frank said, I can't believe he got through the first AuthorCon without being aware of it. I know, especially the number of authors that were there. Now, of course, at those conventions, he's working, so the conversations he engages in are more limited. But then also, a lot of times when Brian Keene's carrying on a conversation, it's other guys trying to talk to him about things he's done. So they're not necessarily sharing as much with him as they do in other conversations because they feel like they're trying to glean information as opposed to provide it. I was surprised he wasn't at least aware of it. Just the number of times I've mentioned it and other people have as well. A number of times I brought it up in articles. It just seems like he would have come on. Even the newsletters that he follows. I know Godless has been mentioned in there, so I guess it just didn't click with him. But that's just the kind of thing that Armand and I were talking about. The fact that hey, first time chat. Thanks for dropping in. just being aware of what's going on around. I think authors that don't have any intention of being on TikTok should have a TikTok account and see what other authors are doing. Authors that have no intention of being on Twitch, wouldn't hurt them to watch a few writing channels and seeing what people are doing, even if that comes down to giving them some ideas for readings that they do on online conventions, or things they would do with their YouTube channel, or whatever it is. Just the act of being engaged with a platform that you ultimately decide not to use is still valuable. So those are the kind of conversations that Armand and I got to have at the Scares That Care convention, especially on the drive up and more so on the drive back. And so that's kind of the valuable stuff. It's good to sell enough to cover the convention. That's a new thing that I'm enjoying very much. But getting those readers and understanding where I can find them is good. Frank says, I agree, dismissing those things as being too old for them is a mistake. Yes, very much so. And then you get into the stage. Now, a couple of those older authors have made enough money to where they're fine. They don't have to do anything new, and life passing, or the industry passing them by, is fine, because they don't need to put the time in to engage those new platforms. But a majority of those older authors who are complaining about being left behind, some of them are still stuck into self-publishing as a mistake idea, and ebooks aren't worth it, and that kind of thing. So they're decades left behind, and if I started talking to them about TikTok or Patreon or any of those other things, they would have no clue. It would be like I was speaking a foreign language to them, because they disengaged so long ago that the number of things you'd have to explain to get them up to this new platform you're talking about would just throw them for a loop. For instance, I don't Twitch, but I understand the value of dynamic purple lighting. There you go. There you go. Good stuff, Frank. I like that you're listening. That's very good. But I did enjoy Scares very much. I'm getting to a stage, unless I can turn things around with myself health-wise, that the number of conventions that I've done in the past is not feasible anymore. But I do recognize that there'll be something lost, something given up, by not physically being at some of these places and being able to engage some authors in person, and being able to see what they're doing and what I might be able to learn from them. So as much as I can, even if that means sticking to some that are closer to me, I still want to be involved in some of those things as best I can. All right. Feel free to jump in anytime anybody has anything to say, but I'm going to keep writing in between our little asides here. Connor gave her a huge smile, missing a few teeth. Sarah thought missing teeth might not be far away in her future too. Mrs. Rankin, my mom said I could bring you these. All right, asking, do you have any tips for newer authors? Well, yes. I would say be careful what advice you take, because as we were talking about some of the older authors, there's people who sometimes feel cheated by time, and so they will give you advice based on the experience they've had before, and some of it doesn't apply as much, and some of it's slanted by the fact that they don't like the newer platforms. So while you should seek advice from older authors, especially on things like style and how to create a story and stuff like that, I would also seek guidance from newer authors who are achieving some things, because they're probably aware of outlets that some of the older folks like myself aren't aware of. I try a little harder to keep my pulse on things. But just the idea of a story, some of the similar advice that would work on Twitch and other platforms like that. Content is king. So the best thing you can do is to write the best stories you can. So anything else that you're engaged with, like figuring out where to publish your work, figuring out how to promote and all those things, all of that stuff needs to follow writing the best story you can. And reading a lot is good too, because you get an idea about how sentences come together and what types of stories catch your interest. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to copy those, but you can learn from them and make your own storytelling work out for you. So read the type of books that you want to write, but then also read books that are in different areas than your area of writing, and that'll expand your toolbox a little. And then it's one of those skills that only gets better by doing it. So writing stories until you're finished is good. I know a lot of newer authors get caught in this trap of getting about halfway or 2/3 of the way done and then don't quite know how to finish off the story, and they just stop and start something new. So finishing a story is better than getting it perfect, and then you can learn to edit it as you go. So just the act of reading and writing is the best way to start. Then you get into the idea of publishing and figuring out where the markets are that you can submit your work, and taking those early rejections, and especially the ones that they offer some feedback on why they didn't take your work. Learning to do that without taking it personally, without getting discouraged, is good, and it kind of teaches you what you need to do with your stories to make them the kind of stories people want to publish, and then you just kind of build your way up from there, I think. So I hope all that's useful. That's very general. So if you have anything else in particular you're interested about, we can get more specific, but that would be a pretty good starting point. So as with anything in life, just kind of be careful whose advice you take, because not everybody knows what's best for you, and a lot of times advice is biased by their own experiences, which may not apply to where you're going. All right, Mrs. Rankin, my mom said I could bring you these. That was interesting. It led her to believe. That was interesting. It led her to believe that Connor had initiated this visit instead of being sent out on an errand by a well-meaning parent. What did you bring me, Connor? He pulled back the checkered cloth to reveal some of the poorest looking vegetables she had ever seen. A couple of them were yellow squash. They were small and fuzzy, leading her to believe that they had been picked too early. They would be green and tart on the inside. The other long green things could have been zucchini. I knew I was not going to spell that right. I don't know what a zucchini is. Okay, zucchini or cucumbers. They were too shriveled to tell. Sarah cleared her throat and put on her best smile. Did your mother grow these herself? If they were store-bought, then Sarah wanted to know where, because she would never shop there again. Connor smiled wider. I grew them myself in my own garden, ma'am. Sarah felt her eyes go wide. That was interesting too. Your own garden. I'm impressed. He bowed his head. Well, I don't need a quotation mark there. He bowed his head. I know they're not the best. Oh no, son. These are just... You don't have to lie to me. I'd rather you didn't. She took a deep breath and said, I think you might have just picked them too soon. I know, but I couldn't keep the bugs and other animals from eating them. I had to pick them before I lost them. Mr. Rankin might have had some... She stopped and bowed her own head. The boy patted her arm. The boy patted her arm and said, I'm sorry. I miss him too. Not as much as you, of course. But he was so nice to me, even though I was just a kid. I started growing a garden because he talked about the vegetables he used to grow. Is that right? She lifted her chin couldn't keep it from quivering. Is that right? She lifted her chin but couldn't keep it from quivering, so she looked away. The boy wiped away his own tears, and that was the moment Sarah was endeared to him. Yes, ma'am. I was hoping he would be around to help me. I'd only just gotten my dad to give me permission to use the old field out past the woods. It's still our property, and he might sell it someday, but for now I was allowed to use it. I was running to tell Mr. Rankin when my mom told me what had happened. Alright, I got some extra enters there, so let's get rid of those. Alright. Sarah was fully crying then. He set... Alright, let me raise this up just a touch. He set down his basket at her feet and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have upset you. No, I'm glad you came, Connor. It means a lot to me." Thank you, ma'am. She took up the basket over her own arm and said, "Let me get you a few things to take back with you. I don't know how big your garden is, but Mr. Rankin had some stuff that you can put around the edges, and other stuff you can dust on the leaves to keep animals and insects away. You have to promise me promise me that you will follow the instructions and not poison yourself? I'm a smart kid, Mrs. Rankin. I won't do anything stupid. I promise. Well then, I think I also might have some plant grow chemicals that can help mature your vegetables faster too. I've been using old eggshells and composting the way Mr. Rankin told me he did. Sarah paused and composed herself before continuing. That's very sweet. This stuff will help though. You'll need to make a few trips to move it all, and you'll need to store it in a dry place away from any little kids like your sister. He did as she said. She tried his pitiful vegetables, and they were as tough and tart as they looked. The bit she tried gave her the hiccups. She scooped the rest into the trash. All right, scene break. All right, Armand subscribed. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you dropping in. Okay. Sarah spread the array of vegetables across her kitchen table. It was a ridiculous bounty. She couldn't figure out how he managed to get all of these things to her in a single trip. as if reading her mind, Connor said, I tied big plastic crates to both sides of my bike and pedaled real slow. His cheeks were flushed, and he stunk of dirt and sweat. It wasn't a filthy, unwashed smell, but one that reminded her of days working in gardens. Let's say she refilled his grape Kool-Aid and he drank it all down before taking another breath. She only made it and kept it in the fridge for him, but decided she should let his stomach settle before giving him any more. She took in the sight of her table. The carrots were bright orange, even through the thin layer of soil that still needed to be washed off. Fluffy green sprouts billowed out from the tops. These carrots were almost as long and thick as her forearm. These yellow squash were bold, bright, and I need to put a comma there. I always use the Oxford comma. And heavy, bright, heavy, ripe, let's say. No confusing. No, let me use complete sentences. There was no confusing the zucchini. Still can't spell that right. No confusing the zucchini from cucumbers now, even though both were enormous. tomatoes. The tomatoes. Come on, now I know how to spell tomatoes. What's going on here? All right. The tomatoes were thick enough to slice as wide as the sandwiches she would put them on. And they were already bright red. The kid could have started his own produce section with all the other varieties here. You're sure your family can't use a few of these, Connor? We got 3 times this many at home. My mom begged me to pass them around. I even dropped off several with the neighbors before I brought these to you. Will you not eat them? Well, I'll cook them up. We'll probably make some stews too. Maybe break out the old jars, blanch some, and store them for later. You might need to teach my mom some of that too. She's freaking out. Calling everyone at church to come take some. You should be proud, Connor. You've done great work. I know Mr. Rankin would be impressed. Alright, I don't need to hit every little key there, so let's figure out what I'm doing wrong. Would be impressed with you. Thank you, ma'am. Was it that grow stuff I gave you? No, I stuck with Mr. Rankin's formula of eggshells and such. The stuff to keep away bugs was a big help, though. once they let the garden alone for a little while. Once they let the garden alone for a little while, it really took off. I think everything is too big for them to bite now. Sarah laughed at that. Felt odd to be laughing again, but it wasn't terrible. I sure could use something to keep the big vines and plants off the ground. I was using sticks, but everything outgrew them. Now I have kind of a mess on my hands. Sarah pointed to the garage. We have some old lattice. It's stuff Mr. Rankin used years ago, and we were storing forever. Nothing we could use in a condo, but they're not a condo. I need a condo. I'm not sure what a condo is. Sounds like some type of house in Star Wars. Nothing we could use in a condo, but there they leaned. There they lean. Oh, excuse me. A can-do attitude. There you go. I'm always nervous when I sneeze now because I separated a rib not that long ago when they were trying to work me over for seizure stuff, and it hurt so bad when I sneezed back then. So now I'm all nervous that it's going to happen again, but it hasn't happened yet. It's the moment I let my guard down that I'm going to be in trouble, though. All right. Nothing we can use in a condo, but there they lean in the garage to this day. They are extra tall, so I don't know if you can figure out how to get them back to your... Okay, let's do M dash. I'll figure it out. Thank you, Mrs. Rankin. They retrieved the lattice from the garage. I'll figure it out. Thank you, Mrs. Rankin. They retrieved the lattice from the garage. He had 2 more glasses of Kool-Aid before leaving, and helped her peel her vegetables. And helped her peel her vegetables. He said he wanted to know how so he could help his mother with all of theirs. Next day, he returned and she taught him how to blanch and jar vegetables for the winter. Scene break. So many potatoes. There had to be at least 11 different varieties. The tomatoes were even bigger than before. Now, 3 different types of onions joined the bounty on her table. I didn't even know you were growing these. Connor shrugged and sort of looked away at some spot on the floor. His hair was getting long enough to curl at the ends. His skin was tanned deep. He showed freckles across his shoulders where she could see around his collar. He probably got burned and peeled a few times. Maybe it was while playing outside, but she suspected he was spending a lot of time farming. Let's say gardening. At what point did you grow enough that you had to switch to calling it farming? The boy had to be getting close, no matter where that line was. If you don't want them, you can say so. won't hurt my feelings. She smiled and said, "No, sir. You are saving me plenty on potatoes and onions on my next grocery trip. There is so much you can make with the humble potato." Alright, let's take out this 0 I put in the middle of that word. I don't know what that's about. Alright. As long as you don't lie to me, ma'am. You'll tell me the truth if you get tired of getting all these. Okay? She stared at him. Something was wrong. It could have been him just getting tired of all the work. A hobby that grew a bit too large and was wearing thin on a young boy's interests level. Or it could have been something more serious, stealing his joy. The sort of stuff people from her generation liked to ignore, leaving young folks to fend for themselves. Did she know him well enough to broach that subject, that kind of subject? What would she do with the information if she did? Did she know his parents well enough to deal with them on something like that? She was the old lady they dumped vegetables off on. Gardeners gave extra vegetables to everyone. Connor was becoming quite a prolific one. "Okay, son," she said. "I promise not to lie to you on this. And I promise I'm not tired of your vegetables yet. All right. He nodded and sniffed, but that was it. Do you want something to drink? She asked. I have grape and cherry both today. I also have plain water if you just need to cool off a bit. I'm good. Thank you. She took a few deep breaths and braced herself as she said, if something is bothering you, something you're having trouble dealing with, or the kind of thing you don't know how to say exactly, I want you to answer my honesty with your own. If something is wrong, please don't lie to me about it. If it's something that needs fixing, then I'll do whatever I can to help fix it, but only with your permission. She felt her old heart speed up as she waited on his answer. As she waited on his answer, he looked up at her with hooded eyes, ringed by the darkness of lost sleep. He looked away again before he could answer. I need something to help contain the garden. It's getting a little out of hand, and I don't want anything getting, I don't want the garden to grow out past the field. I don't think that would be good. Sarah watched him a moment and then said, I have old chicken wire in the storage room behind the garage. There are stakes and zip ties to help put it up. He accepted. After that, he did take some cherry Kool-Aid. After all, she talked to him about how to use the chicken wire, and she also showed him how to use old pantyhose to keep extra onions and potatoes. All right. Sarah returned home from a doctor's appointment to find Connor waiting on her stoop. His bike was cast aside in her yard. Any other kid she would snap at for that, but never Connor. Also, the the butternut squash that leaned against her condo, taller than the door, where it twisted and stretched to mad proportions, was quite distracting. She got out to find stacks of melons and enormous pumpkins all along the front of her house. There were beets and radishes, so impossibly large she had at first confused them for more gourds. What the hell, Connor? She blurted out before she could stop herself. I know. It's out of control. I'm not even trying to get you to take all this, Mrs. Rankin. I just figured you had to see it to believe it. Okay. Well, I believe it. If you don't want me to take it, what are we doing here? The chicken wire isn't working. It's still getting out. Alright, let me fix this. She thought she had misheard him. Do you mean something is getting into your garden, Connor? No, ma'am. No animal will come near the place anymore. They wouldn't dare. She wasn't sure how to take that. It scared her, though. She shivered in the warm sun. What do you mean, then? The garden won't stop reaching out. I can't stop it. Come inside with me, Connor. They sat on her couch, and he kept his head bowed and hands clasped. Over his dirty knees, as if praying. Oh, thank you for the raid, Blitzer, and welcome in. Working on a story. He's as if praying. Tell me exactly what is... Tell me exactly what is going on. He took a deep breath then it's a blitz or blitz. Have to go immediately AFK because meat space nonsense. Be right back. All right, take care of the real world nonsense and get back to the virtual world where everything is perfect. All right. He took a deep breath, but then asked a question instead of... He took a deep breath, but then asked a question instead of... He took a deep breath, but then asked a question instead of giving an answer. Did Mr. Rankin... no, that's not how I want to ask it. What did Mr. Rankin do when he needed to stop the garden for good? I'm afraid I don't follow you, Connor. Mr. Rankin was always working to help the garden. Everything else in the world was trying to stop it. After a brief silence, she realized tears were streaming down his face. What is it, son? He said, I need something to stop it for good. I need the opposite of the plant grow and the eggshells trick. I don't know if the answer is fire or poison or what, but it might already be too late to contain it. Sarah licked her lips. You need to show me your garden, I think. I'm not sure it's safe. I know it's not safe. She considered and then shook her head. I need to see it. Oh man, I don't know what I just did up there top. Alright, I need to see it. Can I get there by driving? Sarah followed the dirt path in her boat of a car, feeling it bottom out more than once. The trees were close, trees were close on both sides. But she was still able to steer through. Finally, the field opened up like Connor had said it would, and she stopped. Welcome back, welcome back. And she stopped right at the edge of the woods, like she promised she would. Connor had said, that's not my alarm, is it? No. Connor had said I may have to go out and turn that off for my wife. Connor had said that he didn't have permission to ride in anyone's car, so he had taken his bike and beat her here. She walked through the grass toward him, and he waved her to the side like she was getting too close to the edge of a drop-off. When she stood next to him, alright, I guess drop-off is either two words or it's hyphenated. Let's make it hyphenated. When she stood next to him, she was in position to see the entire garden. It stretched across a massive field. Vines full of all sorts of vegetables, even ones that shouldn't have been able to grow on the same plants, were fat and overripened. Okay. The plants had overrun Connor's chicken wire. And climbed up the trunks of several trees in the woods beyond. Those climbing vines were rich with spotted vegetables that she had never seen in all her years. The leaves of the tree were dying, as if being choked out of their life. This is a lot, she said. Do you see it? Oh, I see it. I just don't know what it is. No, I mean, really look, watch until you see it. Mrs. Rankin. Sarah watched and was about to ask him what he meant before she spotted the movement. The vines twisting out from the wild perimeter of the garden were moving. They were growing across the ground as she watched. They were reaching, like she thought she remembered Connor saying at some point in the past. She had not understood then, but she saw it now. Sarah uttered, no, let's do in her shock. In her shock, Sarah uttered a word she seldom said in private, much less in front of someone else's kid. In her shock, Sarah uttered a word she seldom said in private, much less in front of someone else's kid. Connor just responded by saying, I know, right? Can we just cut it down or burn it away like we talked about? It knows when I'm thinking about killing it. If I do anything besides just pick the vegetables, it knows and starts reaching for me. My God, son. I know, right? As she stared, she spotted bones within the garden. At first, they appeared to be moving, and she was only just able to stifle a scream building in her narrow chest. Then she realized that the bones at the skeleton was shifting because of the moving vines. That wasn't much better. Then she realized that the skeleton was shifting because of the moving vines. That wasn't much better. She at first identified it as the remains of a rabbit, and the garden itself fed upon the creature to fuel its unnatural growth. Had the garden itself fed upon the creature to fuel its unnatural growth. Then she realized it was much larger than a rabbit. Maybe a dog. Sarah swallowed several times. I ate vegetables from this garden. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't realize what was going on until recently. I still don't completely understand. Mr. Rankin had something else, as I recall. What? The boy asked. Like all this, I didn't understand. I'd never seen it before. It was just one more thing he kept long after we didn't need it anymore. What was it, Mrs. Rankin? Can it help with this? Please. I don't want it to reach my house and my family. Sarah nodded and continued. He used to talk about gardens sometimes getting out of hand. He said the bounty could turn into a curse, and then the good fortune had to be pushed back before it was too late. I thought he was just an old man talking. But I think he knew about this secret of what could sometimes happen. Whatever it is, we need it now, the boy said. The hazmat suit was too big for Connor, but he managed. Sarah's was too big for her, too. They stayed close together. I'm going to make another space here. They stayed close together to watch each other's backs. It might have been good to have more help than a young boy and an old woman all on their own. But they had no one else that they could trust to accept the truth. They both sprayed again. Before rolling their canisters through a break in the bent and twisted chicken wire. The vines and creepers kept reaching for them, but quickly wilted in the mist of the deadly spray. Soon, the vines tried to crawl away instead of toward the attackers. As giant vegetables blackened and burst sickly colored pulp. The plants even tried to uproot themselves to escape. As giant vegetables blackened and burst in sickly colored pulp, the plants even tried to uproot themselves to escape. The unlikely pair of garden slayers worked their way up and down the undefined rows. As the field finally lay barren and lifeless, they finished off the vines that had killed the trees through the first few layers of forest. When that was done, Connor started to remove the mask over his head. She placed a gloved hand over his hand to stop him. Her voice came muffled, even in her own ears. Not yet. Back at your house and washed off like I told you. Remember? He gave a thumbs up. Connor helped her load the empty canisters back into Connor helped her load the empty canisters back into the plastic before loading up her trunk for her. I'll clean up at home and then come help you with these. He yelled through his mask. I got it. Just take care of you. Am I still allowed to come see you, even if I don't have vegetables? We can play cards, or you can read to me like everyone does with old ladies. laughed and said it was a deal. After he was out of sight, she took off her gear like she had told him not to, and simply discarded it all on the ground. Getting behind, let's say, her eyes and throat burned. She got behind the wheel, used only recycled air, and lumbered up the dirt road toward home. Just published today's tale. Our links welcome here. No, go ahead. You can share a link. All right. She got behind the wheel, used only recycled air, and lumbered up the dirt road toward home. Her throat would tickle her for days. Throat would tickle her for days. She developed a rash around her neck that she worried wouldn't respond to cream until it finally subsided too. At home, say at the condo. At the condo, the last delivery of vegetables, say of monster vegetables. I'm trying to hear what I'm hearing off in the distance. The last delivery of monster vegetables and withered into black, greasy soot all on their own. The grass around them and bleached out and was bleached out and was turning to dead ground. Alright, spelled this wrong two different ways. Was turned to dead, now I'll use it that way, was turned to dead ground underneath. The association's lawn crew was going to have quite a challenge ahead of them, trying to get anything to grow there again. Mr. Rankin, she said as she stepped inside. There were plenty of pictures of him. There were plenty of pictures of him staring back at her, waiting for the rest of the scolding. He had set that poor boy to gardening. And then the kid had continued in his honor and hers. Her late husband had shared his secrets to growing, but had neglected her late husband had shared his secrets to growing, but had neglected to mention the occasional curse that could befall a garden. She supposed he had also kept the means to address just such an unlikely occurrence. So maybe she should give him a break. If not because he was past, then because he had been prepared anyway. Thank you, she decided to say. And I miss you. I miss you dearly, sir. All right. Do feel like I need to add a few things in here. One being more discussion about her grief, kind of compare the garden getting out of control with her dealing with this loss. I think that's necessary to tie the themes together. But then also I need to mention these canisters earlier. So I need to find where we talked about, say, chicken wire. I have old chicken, there we are. I have old chicken wire in the storage room behind the garage. There are stakes and zip ties to help put it up. He accepted. She warned him to stay away. She warned him to stay away from a few canisters on wheels back in the corner. A couple chemical suits hung near those forgotten. Okay, hold on, let me fix this. Near those forgotten containers. She should start clearing out these things, she decided. Should have been done before he died. shouldn't have even been brought here from their old house in the first place. They were supposed to be downsizing. Kedman, it's good to see you again. They were supposed to be downsizing when they moved here. Of course, he was supposed to stay alive so they could travel the world finally. See all the wonders. And stop at the condo just for a quick rest and laundry between. She warned Connor to Connor heeded the warning as they gathered the wire and other equipment. He was a smart kid. After that, comma. All right. Now I need to add something down at the garden, so let's get back down there. Okay, that's the hazmat suit. This is a lot. Dun-dun-dun. Okay. She had planned to see the wonders of the world after retirement, and this was one hell of a wonder. Okay. Lurking, all right. I think I'm going to stop there for now. When I get into the edit phase, I'm going to expand the idea of grief a little bit more and tie that in, but I think I have a good framework for that. I think this first draft turned out better than many of my first drafts do.